just made Sean take the dog to the park so that I could film this for you. They'll be fine, don't worry. We're going to talk about a missing person, and I kind of deep dove into this case. I really want to know what happened. I was actually told about this case a long time ago, and it's kind of popular, so I didn't really research it. So we're going to talk about Randy Leach tonight. Randy Leach disappeared when he was 17 years old. He is the only child of his parents, Harold and Alberta Leach. He was born 3 weeks early, and his mom described him as a tiny little baby. But he grew fast, and he was 6'2" at the time of his disappearance and about 220 pounds. He was a good child, and even though he was an only child, he wasn't selfish or spoiled, and his mom said that he was kind to everyone he ever met. Randy's parents also described him as a hard worker. He was a fast learner and an entrepreneur. Alberta said that Randy was just 5 years old the first time that he learned to use a riding lawnmower. I remember riding lawnmowers in my dad's yard as a kid. Of course, the blades weren't on or anything, but at this point in time in Randy's life, the family moved to a farm on the outskirts of Linwood, Kansas, in rural Leavenworth County, where Harold and Alberta still reside today. Growing up, Randy loved all animals, and he raised pigs on their farm, and he just loved to be on their farm. He loved to fish. He hung out with his cousins a lot, and he worked on the lawnmowers with his dad. He would take them apart and put them back together just to see how they worked. In fact, 2 days before Randy disappeared, his parents purchased him a lawnmower as his graduation present. He had a plan to mow a bunch of lawns all summer for extra money, and then to possibly go to trade school in the fall. And the day that he went missing, he had mowed a lady's yard and then his own. Then he went inside and got cleaned up, and he, kind of just disappeared. But before I get into that, he never acted like he cared about school, and his grades didn't show it though. He was an honor student or an honorable mention B student, but Lucky Duck never had to study much to keep up. Randy's senior year could have been finished with an early out in January, but his parents talked to him and decided that he needed to enjoy his last semester as a senior. And as a graduation present, his parents bought him the car of his dreams, a 66 cherry red Ford Mustang. Now, back to Randy getting ready to go out on April 15th, 1988. His dad asked him if he had enough money, and he said yeah, he had enough, but he wanted to drop by either the Walmart or the Kmart in Lawrence, Kansas, which I have been to, oddly enough. He would like to get a bottle of water wax spend some time with his friends, and it wasn't late. This area was described as peaceful and safe. It's a small town. Everyone knows everyone. Everyone knows each other's kids and cars, and Randy's parents thought nothing of it when they saw him off. They had no idea that it would be the last time that they ever saw him. He got into that car, and there was no way of knowing that he would become one of Kansas State's most perplexing mysteries. Now, Randy gets in the car at 6:45, but he doesn't go immediately to the party. In fact, he meets up with a friend. He goes driving with this friend and looks at his car. It's still at the body shop. It's not completely ready for Randy to drive it yet. It's being restored. Then I don't know if the friend stayed at this body shop or whatever, but he goes to, or reportedly goes to, a convenience store to put some gas in his mom's car because he always replaced whatever he used. He spent about $3. It's 1988, so he got a couple candy bars and a couple sodas, and then he went to the party. Now, because of all of these distractions, he didn't actually make it to this party until 9:30 or 10 o'clock. This party, I read, had anywhere from 50 to 175 people there, which I feel like is a lot for a small town pre-graduation party. Either way. Now, there's a lot of drinking, a lot of drug use going on, and no one could really say when Randy showed up. In fact, no one could really say a lot about Randy at all. Some people said that they saw him not drinking. Other people said that they saw him acting really weird, stumbling around as if he were drunk. In fact, the mother of the person whose party it was, Annie Irwin, said that she saw Randy and he seemed to have some trouble walking, but never saw him with a drink in his hand. Randy's cousin and a couple other people did say that they saw him stumbling around, and the cousin later states that he was stumbling, but he didn't smell of alcohol, and the cousin really didn't think that Randy was drunk. So, what happened to Randy in the 30-some-odd minutes between him being at the gas station and him being at this party, barely able to walk? There was some speculation, rumors that circled that someone had drugged his drink, but it turns out that the person that everyone suspected of doing this actually wasn't at the party at all. So I don't know why she saw him standing in line and told him to go outside, claiming that she didn't want him to fall in the house and hurt himself. We'll talk about that in a minute. Anyway, so it is not completely understood what time Randy Leach left this party, but it was probably after 2 a.m. and well after his curfew of 12:30, which he usually strictly honored. But Randy apparently got into his car and basically drove off the face of the earth. It would not be until his parents woke up the next morning, his mom first, and then his dad. She woke him up when she discovered that the car wasn't home. This was when they realized something is not right. So, Randy had always been responsible. He had never missed his curfew, so for him not to be there, it was very, very unusual. And they started calling. They called this girl that he'd been dating. They called a couple other friends, and no one knew where Randy was. So then they called the police. Now, this moved very quickly. This party was mostly outside, in a field. Much of it centered around a bonfire, and reportedly they had a grain alcohol mixed in the punch, and you could buy like a red Solo cup for $3 and get free refills all night. But when the police showed up at 7 a.m., this entire party scene was spotless. The police got there and they couldn't find anything. The yard had been swept, it had been raked, everything was put away. No cups, no stray cans, no nothing. One of the police officers said you couldn't even tell there had been a party. So someone was very busy between the hours of 2 and 7 a.m. So the police start interviewing people, and again, partygoers were very vague about Randy, what time he arrived, what time he left. No one really seemed to remember anything about him being there, other than the fact that he seemed to have trouble walking. A time for his departure could not be pinned down, and no other details were forthcoming. Randy was subsequently reported missing, and a massive search goes. They search the air, the rivers, the ground, and nothing is found. This is where this case starts to get weird. Authorities and family members start putting up flyers all over the region for Randy and his car. And they started an intensive search of the area. They combed the rivers, but again, came up with nothing. Now, this river theory I'm going to talk about a little bit later as well. Not a single person came forward with any information at first, and the police started to suspect the same thing they always suspect. Randy had simply run away. But friends and family were completely against this. Not only had he been a hardworking student looking forward to life after high school, but he had also left behind his Mustang, which had been the car of his dreams. In fact, he had never even driven it. It was believed by his friends that he would never willingly give up that car for anything. However, adding to this strangeness, there were 2 sightings of Randy. One on April 19th near his high school, and another on the 25th of his mother's car, missing car, driving erratically down Iowa Street in the town of Lawrence, Kansas, which is nearby. But neither of these man shows up at the police station. He claimed he'd been abducted and kept hostage for 2 weeks in a cave by these cultists not far from Linwood. He told the police that while he was there in this cave, that he had been shown the body of a man who looked a lot like Randy Leach, and this is how they threatened him. However, when authorities searched this cave where this alleged body was supposed to be, they found nothing, and in fact, no evidence that a cult had ever been there at all. Oddly, Harold, Randy's father, said that the police had the caves bulldozed and destroyed, although they denied this later. Other odd leads in this case revolve around an acquaintance of Randy's by the name of Steve Daughtry, age 30, who had also been at this party for a high school kid, but whatever. The next morning, he had been seen by Randy's parents driving down their street at approximately 10 miles an hour on a 55-mile-an-hour road twice. They found this very strange. It's 6 o'clock in the morning. They're standing in their driveway barefoot, panicking because their son's not home, and this guy is like lurking in the neighborhood. Strangely enough, this same guy claimed that he was hiking on the banks of the Kansas River and found a dismembered foot. But when the police went back, they couldn't find it. So they said it wasn't Randy's. Why they said that, I don't know. How do you know that if you don't find it? But whatever. Anyway, Mr. Daughtry remained a potential person of interest in Randy's case right up until he died, where he took any knowledge of anything with him to the grave. Randy's parents replaced the car that went missing with him, and soon after they brought it home, the new car was caught on fire. An investigator ruled that a faulty gas line caused it, but Randy's parents believe it was arson. 4 months after Randy vanished, his dog went missing and was never seen again. A few months after that, the Leaches and some nearby neighbors heard gunshots in the area, and the Leaches saw this as a threatening message aimed at them. Police reports began to show up unsolicited in the Leaches' mailbox. The source was never discovered, but they believe it was someone from inside the force who wanted to help them in the face of a failed investigation. In the end, none of these odd leads and tips have led anywhere, and there have been no new ones to follow. In the meantime, Randy's parents have been struggling with authorities. They believe that the police have botched this investigation numerous times. One example is that they failed to thoroughly search some of the creeks until far too much time had passed, like 10 years. There was also the fact that they didn't seem interested in following up on some of the leads as deeply as they should have. One of the worst cases that they didn't really look into, or that they dropped the ball on, was when they arrested a suspect named Eric Montgomery in the 1990s. He had been a suspect in 2 homicides just a few miles from the Leach residence, and he admitted that he and his accomplice had hidden these 2 bodies in barrels that he had tossed in the Missouri River. He died in prison with no evidence that he had anything to do with Randy's case, and what makes it even stranger is the police never told the Leaches about this guy, that they had him in custody or anything, and Montgomery's records have been sealed, hidden away from the public, and authorities have been continually accused by the Leaches of generally just failing to update them. disappearance of their son has forced the Leaches to go to private investigators with their own money and do their own research. But this has met them with more bizarreness. A bit spookily, one of the investigators, soon after taking the case, was found dead with his wife. Both of them shot, and the police deemed it a murder-suicide. Another investigator who helped the family, along with the help of the Leavenworth County Sheriff's Department, helped bring in the 3 men that were released. And it's very strange because after this, both people, the detective and the investigator, quit the case after that and left the state, saying that they feared for their safety. Why? There has to be something. What is going on? The case of Randy Leach remains totally unsolved, even over 3 decades later. There have been no new leads, no new suspects, no additional evidence, and although it is occasionally revisited by authorities, it has largely been swept under the rug. Randy was officially declared dead in 2001. He's never been found. His family has continued all these years to investigate what has happened with little success. They wonder, was local law enforcement in on it? What role did the cultists have to play? Was this just some freaky little town embroiled in strange stuff that they didn't want anyone to snoop into? If so, why Randy? Whatever happened to him, this case has gone right into the land of the weird. I did find an article that one investigator on the case, now retired, and pretty mad that he could never close it. He went public with his theory about what happened to Randy a couple years ago. Timothy Dennis is special agent with the KBI, the Kansas Bureau of Investigations, became the lead investigator about 10 years after Randy's disappearance, and he stayed on the case until 2010. He told the Kansas City Star in 2018 that he didn't think that foul play was to blame. He believed that Randy tried to drive home from the party, lost control of the car, and plunged off the single-lane bridge with no guardrails into Stranger Creek. This bridge has been demolished, but it was on a quiet back road, and he suspects that Randy took this route so that it was less likely to be patrolled by police officers. They did search Stranger Creek, and they did find a vehicle, but it was not Randy's mother's car. They found a different vehicle that had been pushed by the current from the massive pilings of the railway bridge. This discovery drastically dimmed Dennis's hopes for this case. He said that it went from a manageable search area to an unreasonable area because if the current could push a different vehicle that far, what's to keep it from pushing another vehicle 100 feet, 100 yards, 100 miles? Stranger Creek, at the location of this bridge, Golden Road, was not searched by Leavenworth detectives for the first 10 years of this investigation. Dennis contended that when Randy vanished, the creek was deep enough to support his theory, but Randy's mother doesn't buy it. She said it was the biggest bunch of bunk that she had ever heard. Back in '88, the water was too low. In researching this case, I got on Reddit because I like to see what people think, and I saw this post. In fact, I saw 2 posts. The first one is by a person that says their username is "My name doesn't matter," and I got a little laugh out of that. And it brought an angle to this case that I didn't think about, so I'm curious to know what you think. It says, "I keep going over and over the details of this night, and honestly, the person that I consider ultimately responsible for what happened to this young man is Mrs. Annie Irwin, and possibly her husband. I've seen many articles that state Randy was inside her house, waiting in line to use the restroom, and that she told him to go outside because she was afraid that he would fall and hurt himself in her home. Read that last statement again and tell me if that is acceptable behavior. I'm sure she was actually concerned he would hurt her home and not himself. She and her husband had the yard raked and cleaned before police arrived in the morning. I have been on that property. It is not a yard. It is a 30-acre plus property. A Lawrence police officer went there the next morning looking for Randy, and they refused to help him. So the Irwins sponsored a party in which grain alcohol was served to minors. Mrs. Irwin admitted she saw Randy in no condition to walk safely, and yet she threw him out of her home. She did not call his parents. She did not call the police. She did not take him to the hospital. She did not even lay him down on one of the built-in benches on either side of the fireplace, just inside of their front door, and let him sleep it off, or even put him in one of her spare bedrooms. She forced him out of her home unsupervised after providing alcohol to him. She should have been locked up when he was declared dead, and she wasn't. She obviously knew what happened to him at any rate, as evidenced by the fact that they cleaned the yard. She did not think he went off the road or stayed over at a friend's house. She knew he was dead. She should be locked up now, wherever she is. At the very least, she owes that family an explanation. Now, while I don't blame her, I do think that she has some accountability that needs to be accepted at this point. You did have a party with great alcohol with a lot of minors, so there has to be some accountability. And they're right. You could have laid him in your living room and let him sleep it off, or whatever. I know that I drank when I was that age, and those parents took our keys every single time. But we were good kids, much like Randy, so I don't really know, but I thought that was kind of an interesting way to think about it. A Facebook page titled "In Search of Randy Leach" was created to share the memories of Randy and to bring in tips and information that may solve this case. After many years, we'd hoped that someone would come forward, Alberta said. But we think they're scared. We want them to know that any amount of information will make a difference. They don't need to be scared. The 32nd anniversary of Randy's disappearance came and went in April, and he would be 50 this year. Alberta and Harold strive to keep his memory alive at the same house on their farm in Linwood. The suit that Randy never got to wear at graduation hangs in the closet. His prize Mustang is now fully restored, a vibrant candy apple red, just how he wanted. His father takes it out for a spin now and then as a way to remember Randy, which made me incredibly sad. They know that he's gone, but they want to know where he is. They just want to bury him and finally have peace. Randy's family is offering a $25,000 reward for information leading to his whereabouts. A governor's reward is also offered in the amount of $5,000 for information leading to the arrest and conviction of the persons responsible for the crime. Anyone with information on Randy's case is asked to call the Leavenworth County Sheriff's Office at 913-682-5724 or the Kansas Bureau of Investigation at 800-KS-CRIME. I will post both of those numbers in the description box at the bottom of this video. The other Reddit post that I read said that they found a couple cars on Google Earth in the area where Randy could have gone missing, or they found several cars on Google Earth. Either way, that they have pinged a couple of and searched for this car. There's no way it could have sunk that deep that you couldn't find it now, even if it was pushed 100 feet or 100 yards or whatever. I find that very, very odd. I've seen several cases, in fact, one in Missouri, not terribly far from me, that the guy was on his way to work and they found him in the lake several months later. It looked like he'd fallen asleep or something, but no one saw tire marks, no one saw anything. But same thing, like Google Earth, somebody saw the car in the water and found this guy. So what's to say that Randy's mom's car with Randy inside is not somewhere in that creek further down? I really believe that's what happened. I think that the satanic panic thing is just kind of, I find in these cases when you can't blame the boyfriend or girlfriend or whatever, they always blame the weirdo, the outcast, the eccentric one. And being as I am always that person, I have a lot of sympathy for the weird kid. I'm always kind of, we moved a lot when I was a kid. I am stupidly shy when it comes to meeting new people, so Sean asked me if I would ever do a meet and greet. We've been watching 1,000 Pound Sisters on TLC, and they have a YouTube channel, and they did a meet and greet, and I was like, what would I say to people? I know that's not related to this case, but I just think it's so sad when the weirdo always gets blamed. Like, okay, blame the kid who calls himself a Satanist. I read an interview with that guy who said that it's been 30 years and he cannot shake off the stigma of being the kid that they thought did this. I also want to know why a 30-year-old was at this party. Was he a family member of this girl who's, I think her name was Karen? I only read it once. They just said it was a friend. Why was he there? Why was he driving down the road at 10 miles an hour? Why did they say that that foot wasn't Randy's if they never found it? Like, how do you know? Maybe somebody heard that you found it and went out to get it before you could actually find it. There's a lot of weird stuff with this case. Anyway, I'm curious to know if you've ever heard of it. Do you know something I missed? Do you think it was occult worshippers? Do you think he got drugged? Do you think he drove off this tiny bridge? I don't think he ran away. He only had about $60. He apparently had a bank account from selling pigs, and his parents said that it's never been touched. When you see those cases of people that run away to start a new life, it's usually because you could pin down something about their life that either happened or was happening that made them want to escape. But this was a good kid. He was an only child. He wasn't wrapped up in things that he shouldn't have been. He was a hard worker. He had plans. $60 is not enough to get very far. I don't know. Yeah, it's just sad because his parents have been spent every single day for 30 years just wanting to know where their only son is. Harold has devoted so much time. He's gotten a computer, just investigated every single thing that he can get his hands on. I want to know why they won't release the records to them. Doesn't make any sense. They have appealed and appealed and appealed and tried to sue for these records, and they still can't have them. Why? What is in those records that those parents can't see? He just went missing. What did you find that you don't want them to know about? I saw that they released was like 60 of the 5 million pages, and it was all the things that Harold and Alberta had given them, nothing else. Something is fishy with that, and the investigator is quitting and dying, and I don't know. Something